So I'm super thrilled today to be talking to one of my heroes of this world of conscious sexuality, which is Betty Martin, who created the very famous Wheel of Consent. So hello and welcome,
Hello.
Betty.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much
Thanks
for
for
being
having
here.
me. Yeah.
So I think now everybody in the world of conscious sexuality and indeed Tantra has heard of the Wheel of Consent. You really have put together something that is so helpful for so many people. But I think as I have so many listeners on my podcast, I would love it if you could just give a little overview as to what this body of work is, and maybe even how you came across it.
Oh, but that's now how long do we have? That's a really big question.
Question.
That's a great question.
How
Um,
would you put it in a nutshell? Shall I say that, and
yeah,
then we can start
in a
diving in?
nutshell, yeah, it's a great question. In a nutshell, the Wheel of Consent is a practice. So it's something that you come back to again and again. And each time new ahas come up and new ways to have fun and new challenges come up. So you when you come back to it, you notice something that you didn't notice the last time. And it's a practice in taking receiving and giving apart so that you are either giving a gift, which means it's not about you. You put what you want on the shelf, then you tend to your boundaries and your limits, of course, but it's all about the other person when you're giving. Or you're receiving, in which case it's your time to be utterly selfish and you're respecting the other person's boundaries, of course, but it's all about you and what you want. And it turns out that when you take them apart, number one, you have experiences that are possible no other way. There are experiences that are possible when you are receiving a gift that you will not have if you're trying to mush them all together and you're trying to take care of the other person while they're taking care of you. And likewise, when you're giving and you're setting aside what you prefer, there's an experience that's possible no other way. So that's one thing it does. And the other thing it does is it shows you what they actually are. Because if you are trying to receive a gift, but you're also trying to give something back to keep the other person happy or take care of the other person, you don't really know what receiving is because you're confusing it and you're mixing it up. And the same with giving. So it gives you experiences that are possible no other way. It shows you what they actually are. And it clarifies a lot of other dynamics in the relationship that have been confusing up to now. So that's it. It's a practice. It's also a model that takes apart, that notices that there's a difference between who is doing and who is giving. And that's really what separates the Wheel of Consent from any other model or thought that I know of.
Right. Yeah, this is a big thing I think that struck me, that before I came across your body of work, you just sort of like one giver, one receiver, and that actually you found out there's an extra dimension.
Yes.
And I think why it's so important is because this is what relating is, right? Relating is about, that's one thing you can't do on your own is give or receive.
That's right. You can't do it on your own.
I know that's really obvious, but I just really want to say that because I think most people come to Tantra because of this. They're coming not for the spiritual enlightenment, they're coming for the bonus or whatever, but they're really coming because of relationships and how rewarding relationship is in life and how much desire we have. And I think people have desire for giving and for receiving, for surrendering, and they're not even clear what all those desires are. And like you say, it all gets pushed up together. And people try sneaky ways of getting their needs met instead of being clear of what it is and being able to ask for it, right?
Yeah, of course. Because if you don't know how to ask for what you want, you have to have some other sneaky way to, you can hint or you can pout or you can try giving the thing that you want to give and hope that they'll take the hint. Or we make up all kinds of things. Or you can just give everything, because receiving and asking for what you want is too vulnerable. That's always an option. So yeah, I think we do all kinds of things to try to get what
Yeah.
we need. Yeah. Yeah.
I notice at new events like Tantra festivals or where there's a lot of new people, there's so many sneaky mechanisms.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, of course, they always backfire, you know, for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's so great that you put voice to all of this topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Before we go deeper, I think it would be really great if you could just explain that concept, because it was such a winner for me when I heard it. Like, there isn't just a giver and a receiver. So could you
Yes.
maybe just dive into that and explain it for
Yeah.
people who are new to your work?
Yeah. Well, there's a problem with the word receive. And that is that it has many meanings, but the two that we're talking about, one meaning means something is moving toward me and it arrives, or something is done to me. I can receive a caress, I can receive a massage, I can receive a letter in the mail, I can receive a pass to the 20-yard line. It just means it arrives, or I can receive a punch in the jaw. So it doesn't mean that I want it. It just means it arrives. So that's one meaning of the word. A different meaning of the word is that it's a gift and it's something that I want, and I receive a gift that you give. But there's a problem with that. It may be that what I want is for you to rub my back, for example. And so I ask you, will you rub my back? You rub my back. I'm receiving the gift of you rubbing my back. Or it may be that the gift I want is to get my hands up your shirt. That's a very different kind of gift, because now I'm the one who's taking action, not you.
Right.
But it's very much a gift. Yeah, it's a different kind of gift. So now we have these two different meanings of the word receive, and they get conflated. So you think, well, if I'm receiving, that means it's for me and I'm the one who's done to. And therefore, anything that's done to me, I'm supposed to like it. And I'm supposed to be thankful for it. But your body knows that that's not true. Your body knows that there are things that are done to you that you don't want and you don't like. So how do you, so those two meanings of the word receive have to be taken apart. And the same goes for give. They have to be taken apart. And the wheel of consent takes them apart by distinguishing. You can see in the interaction, and you could see who's got their hand on whose back. You could see that, but you can't see who it's really for. Because if my hand is going down your back, it may be because you want it, or it may be because I want it, and you're giving me the gift of access to your back. So which one is it? We don't know yet until we look at what is the agreement that we made. Did you say, will you rub my back? And I said, yes. Or did I say, may I feel you up on your back? And you said, yes. Very different dynamic. So the wheel of consent draws them out in a quadrant, and you can see it online. And you can link it here, I guess. It distinguishes between who is doing and who it's for. So I could be touching you for you, or I could be touching you for me. Big difference. Yeah. And likewise, you could be touching me for me, or you could be touching me for you. Also, big difference. So that's what the wheel of consent, that's the contribution that the wheel of consent makes to this larger conversation about consent. It's not that consent is a good thing. You already knew that. Yeah. It's that there's these two different factors.
When I first heard this, actually, I remember hearing your work and then going for a massage in Bali with a young Balinese man who clearly didn't have much access to female bodies. And I could see he was all kind of, in himself rather than able to give. and that it
Yeah.
was so exciting. And I could immediately feel like, oh no, this is for him, not for me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
do I really want to pay for that? And do I really want to go through with this? And at some point, just it didn't feel like violating because I was clear what was happening. But I thought, after a little while, after a few minutes
Yeah.
realizing how it was going, I said, I've had enough. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
I
good
think
noticing. That's great
yeah,
noticing. And that happens
because
all the
otherwise
time.
it gets into your body and then you're
Yeah.
carrying something and not knowing
Yeah.
what it is. But something that then I began to realize working with couples is that it's not always a bad thing when someone's taking their pleasure, right? That
Oh, hell
actually
no. No, you
it's
need
one of the
that.
most beautiful things.
Yeah, you need that.
So I think this has been one of my big revelations with your work, is that actually when I pay for massage, I really want it in that format where like I ask and they're doing
Yeah.
it for me.
Yes.
But actually in the bedroom, I find that a little bit boring because it's like, okay, I give you this, you give me that. And it's like transactional. But actually where the juice lies in personal life is more in this taking of pleasure with consent.
Absolutely.
And I think in a way that's maybe one of the biggest gifts of exploring the wheel of consent is discovering conscious taking. And I think we have a lot of guilt about that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we do.
that
Yeah.
it's somehow, it's not really in our culture to
Right.
own taking our pleasure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We do have some images of it, but they tend to be very icky, or assault is an example, or feeling somebody up, or groping, or just using somebody's body. Those are all examples of doing what you want with someone's body without their permission, but they're
Yeah.
not very pleasant ones.
Yeah.
So but you're right. That learning how to touch your partner for your own pleasure with their agreement is huge, and it changes everything. Changes the quality of your touch, for one thing. Your hands wake up and lots of things happen, but and it's often very hard for people to
Yeah.
kind of get it. Yeah.
Do you have tips for people who because I notice this old paradigm of stealing, grabbing, grasping is so
Mm-hmm.
strong that
Mm-hmm.
when you say to people you have your 3 minutes to take pleasure, it's quite hard for people
Yeah. Yeah.
to know what that is,
Yeah.
like to even find pleasure back. What have
Yeah.
you found is helpful for teaching people how to reclaim that consciously?
Well, first of all, read the book and look at the videos on the website, because it gives you a lot more explanation. But a couple things make a difference. One is that your hands, you have to wake up your hands to the ability to experience sensation as pleasurable. Because if you can't experience your hands as pleasurable, you're not going to be able to experience feeling your partner's pleasurable, because those circuits are not built yet. And there's an exercise I give on the website called Waking Up Your Hands, which does this. And it does it without another person. I mean, it takes out the relational part. That is, you just feel an object with your hands, and really slowly. And after a while, you notice that it feels pleasant. And then you kind of wonder about yourself, like, what's wrong with me? This pin feels good, but it's perfectly natural. Like, yeah, you have nerve cells in your hand, and that's what they're for. Yeah. So that's a big piece, and you can find that on the website. And another big piece is, when you're practicing with your partner, start slow and simple and not too sexy. When in workshops, we have people starting with the hands and the forearms, feeling each other's hands and forearms, because if you try to start with something sexy, your habits will kick in. It's very, very difficult to overcome your habits. And what you're learning in this experience of the taking quadrant is you're building completely new habit pathways. So it's very hard to do that if it's hot and heavy and sexy. You'll just go right back to your old patterns.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. So anything that's unconscious, you just dive right in there. So you need to,
yeah,
in a
yeah,
way,
yeah.
make it conscious by slowing
Yes,
it
yes.
down, becoming present,
Hmm.
and actually opening. I love how you say opening up this new pathway,
Yeah.
because I noticed that myself, that I was so used to giving massage because I train in
Oh, yeah.
massage, and when I started
Right.
to take pleasure, it's like, oh, it's a different
It's different.
directionality
Yes.
from brain to hand and from hand
Yes.
to brain.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And that's a great description. Yeah, that's a great description.
And the
Another
slowing
thing that,
down, and also I notice I want to open my mouth and breathe differently, and use different
Mhm,
parts of the hand, right? Because giving
mhm.
massage is pretty much always like
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Taking pleasure, it's like sometimes bizarre
yeah,
places are
yeah.
actually more pleasurable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing that really helps is, we do this in workshops too. When you ask your partner, when you say, "May I feel your hand," for example, you look them in the eye, and when they say yes, you wait there. Don't move. You just wait there until you believe them. And you just wait there until you believe them. And you ask again if you have to. Because what's happening here is that they are giving you this gift of letting you feel their hand.
Mhm,
And you need to notice that it's a gift. And you need to notice that it's actually for you. You're not
mhm,
stealing, you're not using, you're not abusing, you're not assaulting, you're receiving a gift that of this person's body, or this part of their body.
mhm.
And if you can just pause and stay there till you believe it, it really makes a
Mhm.
difference. Yeah.
Listening to you speak, it makes me feel the words "you're really allowed." I
Hmm.
said I see
Yeah.
guilt, especially for men. They're so taught they
Yeah.
have to get all these little strategies.
Right.
Or, when I was young anyway, they all had these strategies of how to get under
Right.
the clothes, whatever.
Right.
And so they're
Right.
learning
Yeah.
how to steal what would freely be given,
Yes. Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
and it feels so awful when it's stolen, and it's like, just ask, just look me in the
Yeah.
eyes and ask.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
my joy to give you that gift, but only when
Yeah.
it's with consent.
Yes.
And then
Exactly.
I think there's a healing for those who are used to using, their manipulative ways, to realize they can sit in that
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
allowed.
Yeah.
Such a deep
And
healing.
very often it brings up tears. I mean, just describing it, you were touched listening to it. And that is
Mm.
very common. Like, oh my gosh, I get to do this. This is what I've always wanted to do. And very often there's a tender-hearted emotional response. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes imagine a whole world where everybody has, their 3 minutes here or there of just being able to receive what they truly want. I think our
Yeah.
world would change so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the other place I think that's interesting, we talk about being able to take our pleasure, how difficult that is, but receiving, you mentioned already, it's so vulnerable. Why is it so vulnerable, and how do we unpack that one?
Yeah. Well, the way you're using the word receiving right now suggests that you mean being done to. But
That's
the
true.
taking
Thank you.
quadrant is also receiving a gift.
Right. So
Yeah.
both of those are vulnerable
Yeah.
pieces, right? Whether
Yes.
you're active or whether you're receptive, passive.
That's,
What word would
well,
you use?
not active, like whether you're being done to. Yeah.
Yeah, being done
Yeah.
to. So whether you're
Yeah.
doing or being done to,
Yeah.
the receiving is always the vulnerable piece
Absolutely.
somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, why
I think
is
that's
that?
true.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's because in this practice, in order to receive, you have to ask for what you want,
Mm,
or it doesn't happen.
mm,
No one is guessing here in the practice. When you close the door to the practice and you go back to your life, you can guess all you want. I don't care. But in the practice, there's no guessing. So I have to ask, will you scratch my back in this particular way? And that's hard. Of course, it's hard. It's hard, number one, because you might not know what you want. And that's
Mhm.
true of everyone. I don't know anyone who always knows what they want. So you just need to give yourself a little time, it'll bubble up.
Okay.
And I think it's vulnerable because, and I think it's inherently vulnerable. It's not that there's something wrong with you if you feel
Right.
vulnerable when you're receiving a gift. It's inherently vulnerable
Mm.
because you have to sort of open the door and take it from the porch into your house. And when you open the door, wolves can get in. Like it's
Yeah.
just, it's, you can be seen, your desire now is known. And that's vulnerable because you could be laughed at or you could be shamed for it. Or someone could say no, or someone could say, shame on you for wanting that. You shouldn't want that. All kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
And and if you enjoy it, your pleasure will be seen, and that can be vulnerable, or your
Mm.
delight or your playfulness can be seen, that can be vulnerable. So vulnerable just means that it's possible to be hurt.
Mm. But it's
And
also somehow where all the yumminess lies, huh? Like when I listen to
yes,
you
it is.
describing it.
Yeah.
These are all the good things.
Yes, exactly.
Why we want
And
intimacy.
we get to choose how vulnerable we want to get at any moment. So you ask me, how do you want me to touch you? And I might really want you to stroke my back, but I'm too scared to ask for that. So I'll ask you to stroke my arm instead. That's fine. Maybe some other time I'll ask for my back. You get to choose.
Mm.
Um, you get to choose throughout the process what you want to ask for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So for people who identify themselves or realize that they're over givers, like I think many people when they enter Tantra workshops, they suddenly realize that they go into giving because it's not so vulnerable.
That's right. Of course. That's right. And because it's conflated with doing. So you think if you're the doer in any given interaction, then you have more control over what happens. Maybe, maybe not. Because if you're directing how you want my hands to move on your body, then you are in charge, not me. But it's very often easier to be the doer, or it can feel safer to be the doer because of that. And also because you don't risk, if I'm getting this luscious massage and I'm, oh yeah, it's really great. And then my pleasure is visible. And that's scary. But if I'm giving the massage, then the other person's pleasure is visible and I don't have to reveal my own. So that's another reason. But I,
But
I
then
think,
taking that risk is where all the vulnerable, yummy stuff lies. So
yeah,
ultimately,
yeah,
it's our choice if we want to
yeah,
go there or not. But we're
yeah,
missing out if we
yeah,
always try and avoid that.
yeah. And I think it's also really easy to push yourself to try to do or enjoy more than you actually do. And that's a problem as well, because when it's your turn, it's your turn. I mean, there's no shoulds about it because it's your turn. So, but I think very often, especially in group situations, you think, well, I really should be okay with this erotic massage, even though I'm scared shitless.
Yeah.
I should be okay with it and I should like it and I should be able to relax. So what's wrong with me? That is the wrong question. The question that you'd be better off asking is, what is it that actually sounds fabulous right now?
Mm.
What is it that really sounds great right now? And that may be, it may be a massage with my clothes on. Sounds really fabulous. Well, then ask for that. But you feel the pressure of the group because everybody else is naked. And so you think, well, I guess I'm supposed to like this, when you really don't. And that's
Yeah.
really, that's a big problem in group settings.
I totally recognize that. I now always say, as a facilitator, you know, the right way is always what feels good to you. And
Mhm.
even if yesterday you took all your clothes off and today you want all of them on, you know, also sometimes
Yeah,
we think we have to be consistent, like, oh, I did
yeah,
this today,
yeah,
but today I just feel like being covered up. Well, great, you
yeah,
know, like it's
yeah,
about learning to
yeah,
be authentic again. I think that's so hard for us because our culture doesn't teach us to feel
yeah,
in and make decisions from there. It's just
yeah,
we're not empowered in that.
that's
And
true.
it's a big journey of learning to
Hmm.
reclaim
Yeah.
our bodies again.
Yes, who knew? This belongs to me. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
And
it's
it's
a
hard to
complicated,
learn. It's
yeah,
a lifelong learning journey, as far as I can tell.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I notice comes up around the word consent is people always feel, oh, well, consent and boundaries, that's for new people who are meeting, you know, dating, working it all out. But once you're together, you don't need that. Um, what do you think about that?
Well, in certain states in the United States, marital rape was not illegal until 1971. Yeah, no shit. So, so yeah, consent definitely applies in long relationships. Um, but I think probably defining consent would help,
Yes.
because most people think that consent means permission. If I want to do this thing to you or with you, I need your permission. That's great. And that's true. But that's only one kind of consent. And it's not always the kind that applies. If I want you to scratch my back, where does permission fit in that dynamic? It doesn't fit, it doesn't apply, because it's something that I want you to do. But consent applies.
Mhm.
So consent is a much broader thing than permission. And
Mhm.
if you're saying, if you hear yourself or somebody say get consent or give consent, they're talking about permission. And that's only half the picture. Um, I think of consent as being, what agreement are we making that works, makes us both happy?
Mhm.
That's a very, I mean, this is not a legal definition, of course. This is a
Yeah.
interpersonal use of the word. Um, so yeah, will you bring me a cup of tea? Sure, that's consent. Will you scratch my back? Sure, that's consent. You want to play, you know, you want to play pirates and winches? Sure, that's consent. You know, so consent is, I define it very broadly as being, what's the agreement that we have
Mhm.
that is making us both happy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
really love that.
in the wheel of consent, in the wheel of consent, there's two basic questions. One is, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes, or whatever time you want? How do you want me to touch you? And how do you want to touch me? And if you just keep asking each other those two questions, you'll discover all four of those dynamics.
Mhm.
Um, or
What
another
happens
way
in
would be to say, will you or may I? Will you do this for me? May I do this? And that will also get you the same place.
Mhm. Yeah, and I found that working introducing couples to your work, you know, that it helps them to get out of patterns where
Hmm.
everything is
Yeah,
unconscious. It's just
yeah,
falling into
yeah.
assumptions, you know, like, oh well, we've
Right.
always done this, and you
So
know,
right.
rather than staying alive in the moment and feeling what do you actually want right now.
Yeah.
And and so the sort of exploration, the aliveness, the authenticity, all of that can die very easily
Oh
and
yeah.
fall into patterns of
Hmm.
I always do this, and we have this routine.
Hmm.
And actually the love life can come alive just by touching each other's hands in a new way
Yeah.
because it's more alive and authentic than a
Yeah.
routine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think it's
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's very amazing work. What about in the kind of places where it's blurring? You mentioned this a little bit earlier. So like you think it's for them, but then you're getting a lot of pleasure out of it, is that okay if it all mushes up in together, or do you think it's good to try and keep it separated?
Well, like I started out saying, it's a practice.
Mhm.
And as a practice, it's a practice in taking them apart. So when you're in the practice, take them apart, because that's where it's the juiciest. And that's where you learn the most. That's where you have the most amazing experiences. And then you close the door to the practice, you go back to your regular life, and then you can mush them all up as much as you like. But in the practice, keep them separate, because
Mhm.
that's where the ahas are, and that's where the learning is.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that you don't get to enjoy it. If I'm giving you a massage, I'm probably going to enjoy it to some degree. That's great. Why would that be a problem?
Yeah.
Enjoying it is available at any moment, in any quadrant, any time. Like,
Mhm.
that doesn't tell you whether you're giving or receiving. What tells you if you're giving or receiving is what the agreement you made.
Mhm. Mhm. And what about the opposite? What if you're not enjoying it? How do you know where to put your boundaries around that?
Well, you just have to decide how much not enjoying it is worth it. I mean, like, I may not enjoy giving my partner a foot rub because I'm tired, and okay, I'd be happy to do that for you, but I've only got about 10 minutes worth in me. Okay,
Right.
that's great.
Yeah.
Or you change your mind. You may be doing something that was asked of you, and it's going along great, and you realize, I am actually not comfortable with this. And you just say, you know what, I'm sorry, I need to change my mind. This is not working for me.
Mhm.
Um, and if it's
Yeah.
your turn and you're not enjoying it, then why the hell are you doing it? Because it's your turn.
I think there's a lot of learning there
Right?
because we're totally
Oh,
patterns of
yeah. Yeah.
right.
We think, well, I'm
Patterns.
supposed to like it.
Yes, I
So
think the supposed to
what's
is
wrong
so
with me?
cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that
I,
you mentioned the supposed to. I think that's so helpful, just to
yeah.
watch your own narrative, and to see that as long as we're doing what we're supposed to, we're not going to get back to our authentic
Yeah.
pleasure. And
Yeah.
it's
And,
the biggest
we've
thing
all
you
done
can
it.
get in the way.
I've done it. Yeah. I think we've all done it. And it doesn't work so well. And especially then you beat yourself up because I'm supposed to like this. I don't like it. So what's wrong with me? That's the wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh,
Yeah.
there's so much complexity, isn't it? There's like,
Yeah.
I think when I think about receiving a gift, when someone comes to give you something as a gift, the most awkward and uncomfortable thing is when it's something you really don't want, but you feel like
Yeah.
you should receive
Yeah.
it. Like that's a very
Yeah.
awkward scenario
Yeah.
to find yourself
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And yet, if it's a small thing, it's a small moment, you can let it pass. But if you're in a
Yeah.
long-term relationship and you start doing that, you're going to get stuck with something.
Yeah. 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 I think one dynamic that often happens in heterosexual relationships, at least, is the man is doing all the things in bed because he watched the video, and this is what women like, and so he's doing all the things. So he thinks he's giving, and the woman is putting up with all the things he's doing because I guess I'm supposed to like it, and he seems to like it. He didn't ask me what I wanted, so I guess he likes it. So I'm giving him the gift of my body to do these things that he seems to want to do. So she feels like she's giving.
Yeah, right.
Who's
Oh no,
receiving there?
nobody's really enjoying it.
Nobody. Yeah. And whenever I describe this in a room full of people, everybody's about, and I've been there. I don't recommend either side of that equation. I've been on both
Yeah,
sides. Um,
yeah,
but it happens all the time because I think partly it happens because we're just generous and we want to please our partners. Of course we do. That's great. And we're also not being really clear about what it is that we really want and brings us joy. And the playing the wheel of consent in the 3-minute game is one way to open that up, because you're actually asking, and nothing happens until you ask for what you want. And so it kind of like it changes everything.
So it's actually a good pattern interrupt for couples,
Yeah,
I think,
it's
to
huge.
pause and nothing happens until requested, because it makes you become conscious and feel and tune in and really find what you want to receive. And I totally
it's going to be
agree.
awkward. And
Yeah.
it's going to be awkward, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just fine.
And I totally agree with what you said, that so many people don't know what they even want. Do you have any advice for people who are listening to this, who are like, oh my God, I have no idea. How do they start
Yeah.
to find out?
Well, you kind of have to be okay with your discomfort, and you have to be patient with yourself and slow down. And that's one reason I like the questions. How do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever? Because it's a very simple question, but it's not always an easy question. But when someone asks you, it sort of creates room for you to notice then, oh, what I want counts here. Oh my gosh, it never counted before. Now it counts. Like, what do I do with that? Um, and just be patient with yourself. It may take a few minutes, and a few minutes is going to feel like an eternity, but it's okay. It's part of your time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's awkward, and that's okay.
And I love that you call it a practice, because I definitely noticed from going to workshops that I became better at it. Like something
yeah.
in my body, that when somebody asks, I could just scan my body and then know, oh, I want to be squeezed here and pressed there. And I began to open up a whole repertoire of things that my body wanted, but it took time.
Yes, it does.
It took awkwardness of like, I have no idea, just let's try that, and then learning, like
yeah, it takes time.
And I also think sometimes it's not what it should be. Like, there's that word again, like if you watch the videos or look in the books, it should be this, it should be that, but what your body really wants may not fit that picture, and it takes some time to own it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, it's such there's so much juice into this, and I'm it's such a powerful topic, I think, for everyone to explore. Just one question that I think is also really important is, we just recently did a symposium on healing. We're talking about trauma, and of course so much trauma is where boundaries are violated, and of course there's no consent. So how can this work be used for people who have had trauma in the past?
Well, I think we've all had various kinds of trauma in the past. So I really do not like to separate people into those who have had trauma and those who haven't, because it's a spectrum. And we've all been hurt and overpowered in ways that, in lots of different ways. So it's just where we fall on that spectrum and what particular type of trauma it's been. And we've all been touched against our will before we could talk. Every one of us. You can't be a child and not get touched against your will. So our bodies know how to go along with stuff that we don't want. It's a skill that you possess. You can go along with stuff that you don't want. And for many people, it was much more traumatic than it was for other people. That's a fact. So one thing that makes trauma is that you didn't have a choice. And so when you play this game and play with this wheel, you do have a choice, and nothing happens until you request it. So you do have a choice. So it's an opportunity to notice the choice that you do have and to exercise the muscle of being able to make a choice. And because of that, it's going to bring up feelings of tenderness, confusion, anxiety. All these things are very common and are going to come up, which is another reason to start slow and simple and small, short turns, 3 minutes, simple body parts, arms, feet, maybe, and simple things that don't sound terribly charged. So I can ask for a hand massage that would be a very different experience than if I asked for a full body erotic massage, including my genitals. Like, that's a very different process. Yeah. But by asking for a hand massage, I can start to notice that I'm in charge of how you touch me. And that is huge, huge. So if you have had serious trauma and you struggle with it, I'd recommend seeing a professional who can work with this. And for most of us, working with our partners is great. You know, some partnerships, some relationships have room for growing and learning, and some don't. And that's a fact as well. So it may be that your partner's just not interested in supporting you with this. That's a possibility as well. But for most people, somewhere on this spectrum, working with a partner can be fun and also healing, because you just have to notice that you are in charge of how you're touched. And that changes everything. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. In fact, you know, when I'm listening to you, and I agree, I often also say it's just a spectrum of trauma. That listening to you, I feel like anyone who wants to experience erotic massage, tantric massage, it would benefit from slowing down.
Oh, hell yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And doing
It's way too much for most people. It's way too much for most people. Yeah, yeah.
And if you can practice with one hand and then practice with your arm and then, you know, practice all these different quadrants of exchange, then you can become empowered to be able to go for the more edgy, but, you know, potentially exciting things. But that actually we should maybe all learn in simple steps, so that before we jump into the deep water, we really know how to swim.
That's a good idea. Something which is hard to get at a workshop.
Yeah. Well, I must say, having been in the world of Tantra for over 20 years, I'm thrilled to see that your work is appearing more and more all over the place. And I feel like it's becoming a required piece of the curriculum before people go deeper into Tantra work. So I think it's a huge contribution that you have made to put this all together. Really huge. What was your background? How did you start?
I was a chiropractor for 30 some years. So I had my hands on many, many people in a very structured way. And my hands were very awake to what I was taking in. And then I retired from that. Then I became a sex coach and did sex work. Sacred whore, I call myself, or sometimes just whore, depending on who I was talking to. So this work came out of largely having my hands on many, many people erotically, and noticing that when you ask people how they want to be touched, many people have no idea and get very confused. And so that's where all this came from. Yeah. Amazing. I'm now retired from both of those practices, and now I'm teaching other practitioners.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge contribution, and Yeah, thank you so much for sharing here today.
You
And
are so
we'll
welcome.
definitely put links and encourage everybody who's interested in tantra or sacred sexuality to check this one out first. Learn how to swim before diving in any deeper. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to meet you, and thanks for having me.